All right, F tier. I'm just going to read them off. You give me your quick reactions, then I'll provide context where necessary. It's two teams. It's not a place you want to be, but it's not going to kill you. These aren't terrible teams this year. It's the Dallas Cowboys and it's the Chicago Bears. Cowboys, Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders. Bears, DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson.
This makes sense. I mean, this totally makes sense. The Bears dumped capital into DeAndre Swift. There was times last year where, just like with the quarterback not knowing what film to watch, sometimes I didn't think that DeAndre Swift knew which hole to hit. Having the right landmarks, having the right aiming points, that's the simple part of the offensive side of the football. I never played running back, but I was in a million meetings with him. And I'll tell you, as an offensive line, if I don't pick my foot up and put it in the ground immediately and get my second step in the ground, there's things that are repeated from a terminology standpoint. In the offensive line, it's always get your second step in the ground. That's where you get power. For a running back, the thing I heard all the time was aiming point or landmark. The Bears need to hit a home run this year on getting DeAndre Swift on the same page with Ben Johnson and what he's trying to install. Because if he is, my God, it's so explosive. And I'm thinking back to a number of screens as well where he wasn't following his blockers. He wasn't staying on the sidewalk, so to speak. I like Roschon Johnson a lot. Powerful guy. Met him in person, bigger than he looks on film. Like, you meet him in person, you're like, damn, I wish they would just give him the ball 32 times a game. But a young group of running backs, not a lot to say. It makes sense that they end up in the F tier, but knowing Ben Johnson, I'm assuming he can get some good stuff done with this room. And for the Cowboys, a lot of it is going to be predicated on whether or not that young offensive line can gel. They brought in two rookies last year. It was lackluster for one of the two rookies more often than not. This year, they obviously bring in some more guys into the rookie class, a young nucleus. If they can be on the same page, I don't doubt that Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders can get it done from a production standpoint, but they're going to need to be much better at the line of scrimmage. The Cowboys are.
I think this tier speaks to a point I want to bring up before we even get into these players, that the running back position is damn near impossible to separate from, one, your scheme, two, your offensive line.
Yep.
And two guys in this tier, Miles Sanders, DeAndre Swift, are like part and parcel of why it's so difficult. Miles Sanders was averaging over 5 yards per carry when he was in Philly. He goes to Carolina and can't even see the football field behind that offensive line. DeAndre Swift, same thing, 5.5 per carries last year in Detroit, 4.6 in Philly. Goes to the Bears, 3.8 last year. Like, it matters. The scheme and the run blocking you have in front of you at the running back position so much that it can make you look like an all-pro 1 year, and you go to a lesser situation, you look like a guy who shouldn't even be starting the NFL. And we saw some of those things. Even think back to the Hard Knocks with the Detroit Lions, 2022. You saw Deuce Staley ripping DeAndre Swift for his vision, saying, like, you got to hit these holes. The hole's there. You got to stick your nose in, and you can't be dancing. You can't be trying to bounce outside, because, as we saw this past season, when the blocking's not there, those turn into negative plays. Those you cannot afford to have. And I think we really saw that come to light with Swift. And then Sanders, obviously, just like, he was a guy when he was in Philly, when they had those great offensive lines. I mean, they had a great offensive line for like a decade. I just remember watching him just being like, he is leaving yards on the table. And now, obviously, you saw Saquon Barkley go there and not leave those yards on the table, and what that offense could look like. So two guys who very much, I mean, they have talent, but I do not think they are built to run behind bad offensive lines, as you've seen. And then the other one, Javonte Williams. Unfortunately, I just think the injury he had his second year in the league just robbed him of any sort of explosiveness. He was a guy coming out of North Carolina who wasn't explosive to begin with. I believe he was like a 4.6 guy coming out of North Carolina. He was a strong physical runner who had just enough to keep you honest. That just enough is gone after he tore ACL, LCL, and some other ancillary knee damage that he had in that injury. He has not looked the same since. He had only 4 of his 139 carries last year went for 15 plus yards. That rate is just, you can't live with that in the NFL. 3.7 yards per carry, 3.6 yards per carry last 2 seasons. There's a reason he came very cheap to the Dallas Cowboys. They, to me right now, even compared to the Bears, are probably the most concerning running back room in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, this was the concern last year. I mean, how often do we go in the HQ desk and our awesome hostesses were like, hey, what's the deal with the Cowboys? Are they going to sign a running back? You know, is this going to happen ever? Well, you look at the running back room this year, and if Javonte Williams has a hiccup in his recovery process, if Miles Sanders is not using his vision the right way and leaving those yards on the table, we could be looking at another debacle for the Cowboys running back room. And they've already got enough question marks with the offensive line room. You know, the gelling is the question mark. And then in the receiver room, obviously you bring in somebody that's explosive like a George Pickens. What the hell's going to happen there?
It might be a Dak. I mean, if you had a different OC there, if you had Mike McCarthy still as the OC, Dak might lead the league in pass attempts this year. McCarthy was never one to have to lean on the running game. We'll see with Brian Schottenheimer if he does the same, but he's much more run heavy than Mike McCarthy ever was. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. Let's get to the D tier, where there's some controversial ones in here, but I'll explain mine after your takes. Tennessee Titans, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears in the D tier. Cincinnati Bengals with Chase Brown, Zach Moss, Samaje Perine. Kansas City Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, Elijah Mitchell. Washington Commanders, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler, Corey Krosky-Meyer, who they drafted in the 7th round. New Orleans Saints, the last one here, Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are we must be in a really good spot league wide if some of these teams are D tier. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've got some really good running back rooms coming up. When I look at the teams that are in the D tier, more often than not, I see one really effective player and then a couple guys that you could probably not hand the ball to or give the ball to a lot. When I look at the Titans, I like Tajay Spears a lot. And couple that with who they've got coming in at the quarterback position, I think that they could become a 1-2 punch in terms of the safety net at the running back position in the passing game. I like his production out of the backfield. Obviously, a pretty decent runner. The Titans team needs to prove that they can, you know, like a lot of these groups that are down here on the list, that they can put together a blocking scheme and make it happen over the course of 65 plays throughout the game. They need to be able to get these guys carries. They can't have their rookie quarterback out there throwing it 50 times a game. That just ain't going to work. And for the Bengals, my God, Chase Brown, he's like top 5 guys that I want to see have the football in his hand. I know that Joe Burrow's the quarterback. I know they got all these dudes making a ton of money on the outside, and they got to get them their fair share of volume. But when you give Chase Brown the football, whether you hand it to him or you throw it to him, explosive things happen. Go take a look at the Chargers game last year. Chase Brown was unbelievable. And for the Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco coming off a year where he dealt with injury. Kareem Hunt came back from the dead. He felt like he was gone for a decade from the NFL. He comes back, and he's like a real part of Andy Reid's offense. But Isaiah Pacheco, he's the lightning rod. If he can be healthy, which is a big question mark, with his running style, with the volume of carries he gets, you're looking at a guy who it could finish out either way. And that goes for any of these running backs. But Isaiah Pacheco has had a history of getting injured now. And if he can't be upright, then Kareem Hunt becomes your number one. And then you're in a tough spot. You're almost in a one-dimensional spot. I don't care how good your offensive line is, because even if you are untouched at 3.5 yards, you ain't getting to 4 yards if you're a guy like Kareem Hunt at this stage in his career physically. For the Commanders, Brian Robinson Jr., obviously a ton of fun. Great story there. Him and Jaden Daniels, fun to watch. Terry McLaurin has been in the news a lot, but I'm hoping to see him in a Commanders jersey again. Great dude, great football player. Austin Eckler, at this point in his career, his effectiveness there's a question mark, but he's got that versatility. He blocks, he catches, he runs the football. He's that veteran presence we talked about at the beginning of these segments. I like the Commanders, and with Jaden at quarterback, it makes the running backs that much more dangerous. That's just the cold, hard facts. It's like watching Lamar and Derek. It's like
that's one that's just, it's impossible to separate those two.
You have to overinvest in your attention to the quarterback position, which leaves a lot of these running backs in good spots. And then the Saints, 2 words: Alvin Kamara. He's the only reason these guys are not in the F tier. And even though he's not himself, he's still Alvin Kamara. He earns this respect from me.
Alvin Kamara, a couple things.
Not as a running back, as an offensive weapon.
Yeah, I agree. He's still a great pass catcher. But he has not averaged over 4.2 yards per carry since 2020.
It's been a while.
He turns 30 in July. It's upcoming month. So anytime you see a 3 to start a running back's name, you start to get concerned. And I think he's already been on like a somewhat of a downslide. And he's never had a 1,000-yard season in his career. He's obviously always been a dynamic dual threat, and his receiving ability is great. But him alone at this point, I think is not carrying a running back room. And then Kendre Miller, obviously, he had like a blood feud with Dennis Allen, who didn't want to let him see the football field. I think he's talented, but we just don't know what he is at this point. So that one might be controversial, but
so they're probably F.
I don't see Alvin Kamara as the same guy. Not saying he's bad.
Let's put him at F then.
I think the closest team to F in this one is the Commanders, actually. They were the one team where I'm like, you watched them last year, and they just got so much play out of the fact that Jaden Daniels created so much space for this offense. Ryan Robinson Jr. So Ryan Robinson Jr., their lead dog last year. 4.3 yards per carry while facing the lowest average box count of any running back in the NFL last year. If you're going 4.3 against the lowest average box count.
We call that the I dare you defense. I dare you to run the ball. I dare you to run it. Can you run it against 6 people in the box?
That's just like none of those guys stand out. And the one thing I couldn't believe the Commanders didn't do in this draft. Now, I love their draft. I'm not going to criticize their draft. But we just saw what a Derrick Henry did for the Ravens. We just saw what a Saquon Barkley did for the Eagles. When you have that dynamic run at the quarterback position and you pair another dynamic guy next to him, all of a sudden it's just like in the candy store with your running game. It turns it into a juggernaut. This Commanders running game is on the precipice of that. I mean, it's so close to that with just Jaden Daniels, but they just have such a below average tier running back room at this point in time, in my opinion, even though I love Corey Crossy-Merritt. I think he's great, but I just think that they could have added so much more in this deep running back class. The other one that may be a little controversial, the Chiefs, obviously Isaiah Pacheco, got taken the fact that he was so injured last year. I don't love their depth. Kareem Hunt, Elijah Mitchell aren't doing anything for me. And the fact that Pacheco coming off injury, I think he benefited a lot from that dominant offensive line. We'll see if it takes a step back this upcoming season with Joe Thuney not in the fold anymore. But I think he's not a guy who's going to carry a running back room all on his own. You need some ancillary pieces. And right now, the Chiefs, in my opinion, they still really have those. So that's my D tier.